So, a couple of weeks ago, I was drafting Edge of Eternities with some mates down at my local game store, and I was sitting directly to the left of a newer player, someone who'd just been getting back into the game the last month or so. And they passed me in pack 1 for my second pick, the Endstone. Now, this is a card that's extremely strong in Limited. The life resetting ability makes it very difficult for your opponent to kill you, and the ability to draw a card for doing literally anything just basically means you win the game by default. And we all knew this, so I turned to this kid and I asked him, are you really sure about that last pick? Would you like to take this card instead? And he said, no, like, that card's yours. I'm afraid of how to win with it. Or something along those lines. I'm afraid I won't understand how to win with it. And, I was really confused, because it's not like he thought the card was bad. It's the Endstone in Limited. We've been talking about it the whole time the set's out. He's got a few copies. He knows that this card is good. It was the fact that, to his mind, as a new player, he didn't understand how card advantage translated into a game win. And that really got me thinking. And I realized that a bunch of these ideas that we have about the game, or that we develop about the game over the course of becoming experienced players, are really unintuitive if you don't have a sort of comprehensive understanding of how the game works. And so what I said to this kid at the time was that the way that you win a game of Magic the Gathering is by doing more things than your opponent. And that, he said, was pretty simple, and I told some mates this story, and they all seemed to agree with it, and I started working on it more, because I wanted to flesh it out into something like a real piece of advice that I could give to new players. And I also wanted to understand, why is it that, like, yeah, it is kind of just true. You win games of Magic not really by doing anything specific. I mean, by doing specific things, but it doesn't matter what you are doing. As long as you're doing more of it than your opponent, you're probably going to win the game. And I wanted to break down that mechanism. And let's go back to the idea that started it, a card advantage. This is something that experienced players all understand is good, but new players often need to be told is good. And why is that? Well, because new players will look at cards which draw you cards, and they will say, this does not put power and toughness on the battlefield. And they're right. Where's the disconnect there, right? As an experienced player, we understand that having many cards can put much power and toughness onto the battlefield, but a new player isn't necessarily thinking that many steps ahead. Magic can be broken down into a game with 3 actual resources, all of which allow you to do stuff in their own way. There's your life total, which is the most obvious one, and it's the one that new players tend to fixate on, but more experienced players, or even intermediate players, learn pretty quickly doesn't actually matter that much, because the only bearing that your life total has on your ability to do stuff is, as long as it's more than 0, you can do stuff. Then second, there's cards. Obviously, you need to have access to stuff in order to do it, and playing cards is generally the stuff that you do. There's also activated abilities and sort of things, but that can all sort of be boiled down into, like, demi cards of just like, you play the card, you put a thing, and then it has a thing you can do, which is like having a card in your hand, right? So, cards. You get 1 card per turn. Also very crucial. And finally, there's mana. And mana's a bit different from cards, but in another way, it's also the same. In the same way, you spend mana to do things, in the same way that you spend cards out of your hand to do things. But mana, you tend to spend in bigger and bigger blobs as the game goes forward. You start by spending 1 mana on a card, and then next turn you might spend 2 mana, and then 3 mana, and so on. Whereas cards, it's really, well, it's not difficult, but it's much less common to find a card that requires you to spend more than 1 card to play it. So where does that leave us? Well, in terms of doing stuff, there are two resources that actually allow you to do it: mana and cards. You only get one of each of these resources every turn. You draw a card and you can play a land. You also untap all your lands, but you draw a card, you play a land, right? And this is where one of the lessons I learned from Phyrexian Mana comes in. If you can break that one per turn cycle on either of those resources, you're ahead. And so, mana advantage and card advantage. This is where these concepts come from, because they allow you to do more things. Obviously, there's a bunch of things that you can do which don't make you win the game. Like, you can untap a Voltaic Key with itself. That's a thing you can do. It's not going to make you win the game without a whole bunch of other stuff going on. So, why is it that these things are so important? And well, that's where it comes to another idea that I'd actually already fleshed out a bit when talking about deck building, which is game plans. See, Magic is not a tug of war. It's closer to a race, I guess. It's closer to tennis, where there's a state of the game that each player is trying to reach, and they're divergent paths. They're not directly opposed, and they have to interact with each other in order to reach that end state, but the progression is not mutually exclusive. Both players can be scoring, if as you like, without causing the other player to fall back. The key thing is to be the player who reaches your end state first. And so, if you can do more things than your opponent, you can progress more quickly along that line, and then you reach that end state. Coming all the way back now to cards, right? We're still talking about card advantage, but we're talking about it now in the context of a very different sort of structure to what we were talking about before, because when I'm chatting with a new player, he's saying, I've spent 7 mana on an artifact that does not kill my opponent. How do I win the game with this? And the answer is, well, not right now. You win the game because the Endstone doesn't actually let you do that much stuff still on its own, right? It doesn't let you play more lands. It doesn't give you more mana, so even if you have more spells to cast, you can't necessarily, like your opponent, if your opponent has 3 cards in hand and also 7 lands, like, you know, double spelling with the Endstone is the same as double spelling without the Endstone, but it means that you've got more cards left in your hand. So what it gives you is not the ability to do more stuff right now, but the ability to do more stuff over time. And so by the time you reach the end of the game, you have done more stuff than your opponent, right? Or rather, winding it back, you're able to spend your stuff on delaying your opponent's game plan because your stuff is replaced immediately while their stuff is not. And so the Endstone, in a way, gives you the freedom not to win the game. The Endstone, what the Endstone actually says is, don't worry about winning the game, you will win the game. Worry about not losing the game until that happens, right? Because as you go through the game, all you have to do is be able to, like, check off your opponent's resources with your own resources. And if you're spending at the same rate, Endstone will replenish you faster, and so you'll win. It gives me this whole new sort of framework around this idea of action equity, which I like to measure as the balance between the number of things each player needs to do in order to win the game from a given board state. And the reason that I measure it that way, distance to goal as opposed to distance from start, is that it's a much easier to interpret a game state that way, right? Because you could say, like, oh yeah, you know, this player sits down and plays, you know, a land into a Sol Ring, into a Mana Vault, into a Mana Crypt, and so on. But if at the end of their first turn, they have played 6 Mana Rocks and they have no cards in hand, well, they still have a lot of work to do to win the game, right? Compared to a player who starts on Land Ragavan, right? This player's done far fewer things in the course of the game, but they have far fewer things left to do to win the game. And so you can describe that player as having broken action equity, right? Because they've done fewer things, but they've got less far to go. This is something that I think has really helped me to understand the way I view the game from not just a player's perspective, but a sort of an educational, I get it, informational, let's go with informational perspective. You can't call this educational, this is rubbish. If you take this idea of saying, hey, when you're thinking about the game, the easiest way to think about it is how much stuff you need to do to win compared to your opponent, then a lot of this other stuff starts to fall into focus, where it's like, oh, if I have more cards, then the only pressure on me is to trade off my opponent's resources as efficiently as possible, because I'm going to end up with more of them at the end. Whereas if you say have more mana, then the onus on you is to start just spending it as much as possible. These types of things where the way that you punish different board states, for example, like an opponent stumbling on mana, become a lot clearer. And I thought that was really helpful, and so I wanted to just talk about it today. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that sort of fell out of that sort of brainstorming, analytical sort of... It's been on my mind for a couple of weeks. Obviously, we were drafting Edge of Eternities. Spider-Man's almost over now. Like, this has been a while in the making, but this is all the ideas that I kind of wanted to present in one video. The idea that Magic is won by the player who does the most things because they fulfill their game plan sooner, and so having access to more primary resources in terms of mana and cards is a more effective way of winning the game than simply putting power and toughness into play. This is, I think, the core idea that I wanted to express, and then maybe in a couple of weeks I'll have time to do a video on something like, you know, minor advantages, things like tempo, information, board presence, because I also wheeled a Lutheril core the other week in a room full of, like, arena mythic drafters. So, you know, there's some stuff that we need to work out here. But for now, that's all of it. So thanks so much for listening, checking it out. Let me know what you think, and if you had any sort of questions about clarifications, things that I didn't properly explain, I'd love to, get some feedback. But for now, thanks so much for watching, and I will see you next video, or if you want to drop by my stream, 5 to 8 p.m. on Wednesdays, Sydney time. I'm still playing Silksong. I'm about to face the last judge, I think. Come say hi. Love to see you there. Till then, good luck, have fun, may the best wizard win.